The ballroom shone like a dream, crystal chandeliers, glittering champagne, flowing laughter echoing across marble floors. But in the midst of that perfect celebration sat one man apart, a figure the crowd pretended not to see. Jonathan Sinclair, once the youngest billionaire on Forbes' heir to a financial empire. Power and fame still clung to his name, yet tonight all anyone noticed was the gleam of a wheelchair beneath his flawless tuxedo. Once a man who commanded every room, now reduced to silence at the corner of a wedding, where love was celebrated while he was left to remember how he lost his. Jonathan sat upright, tuxedo perfectly tailored satin black tie knotted neatly, his deep gray blue eyes scanning the crowd. But his gaze carried no joy. It reflected distance, as if he were someone outside the glass wall watching the party from afar. He had once been the center of it all, a skilled equestrian, a CEO gracing every magazine cover. But since the car accident 2 years ago, everything had collapsed. His spine was injured, his legs numb forever. His fiancée, Brianna Kane, left right after the doctor announced Jonathan might spend his life in a wheelchair. Friends drifted away. Business partners kept their distance. And now at this wedding, he was nothing more than the disabled guest sitting alone. The champagne glass in his hand remained untouched. He didn't even bother to sip. The sharp laughter from the dance floor only made his heart twist tighter. People come here to celebrate love, he thought bitterly, his lips curling into a wry smile. I came here to remember how I lost mine. Memories surged back the engagement ring he never got to give. Brianna Kane, leaving in tears, whispering, I can't live this kind of life. The door slammed shut. He stayed behind, alone just like now. The music shifted into a sweet ballad. Couples drifted to the dance floor. Even the old uncle took his wife's hand, eyes full of tenderness. All the light shone on them while darkness draped over Jonathan. He leaned back in his chair, eyelids half closed. Insecurity clawed at him, once proud, now nothing but a burden on the world. And then he heard laughter different from the rest. Not the restrained, elegant laughter of the elite, but bright, genuine, the kind that cut through the awkward air of the party. He opened his eyes. At the last table, a young woman in a simple blue dress was trying to calm down a restless boy. The boy put a napkin on his head, pretending to be a superhero, then burst into giggles. The mother laughed with him instead of being embarrassed. In that instant, Jonathan felt his shoulders lighten unexpectedly. He didn't realize his gaze had lingered on her for so long. She wasn't dazzling like Brianna Kane. No heavy makeup, no glamorous gown, but that smile, that warmth suddenly made the noisy room fall quiet inside him. For one fleeting moment, he forgot he was in a wheelchair. He even forgot the whispers of pity all around. Then the boy, about 6 years old, pointed at him and shouted, "Mommy, look! That man has the coolest chair ever." The entire hall turned to look. Jonathan froze. Normally words like that cut like knives, but this time, instead of pity, the boy's eyes shone with pure admiration. The mother blushed, trying to hush her son, but then she laughed, shaking her head. Her eyes met Jonathan's warm, unflinching gaze, and in that 1 second, Jonathan felt not so alone. The wedding glittered like a luxurious dream. White silk draped from the ceiling, roses lined the aisles, and elegant laughter rang between clinking crystal glasses. In the farthest corner of the hall, a small round table sat isolated, just like the people seated there. Nora Fields sat at that table. She smoothed her wavy brown hair and sighed when she realized there wasn't a single familiar face around her. She was 29 this year, though her bright eyes and youthful smile made her look barely past 20. She'd been invited here only because of a fragile connection. Emily Brooks. Today's bride had once been her college classmate in literature. They had shared a few books and a few study sessions, but after graduation, Emily Brooks had rushed into her career and marriage, while Nora had been consumed with becoming a single mother. She glanced around. The tables near the stage were packed overflowing with gowns and polite smiles. Chapsum. Nora too. Table shoved against the edge near the door felt like a reminder that she didn't quite belong in this world. Nora inhaled deeply, reminding herself. Come on, Fields. Don't look gloomy. You didn't come here to impress anyone. Just to give your blessing, eat a slice of cake, and go home. Pulling out the chair beside her, her 6-year-old son, Caleb Fisher, scrambled up, his bright green eyes wide as he took in the hall. Wow, Mommy. This place looks like a fairy tale movie. And that piano was huge like the one in Santa's house. Nora laughed. Yeah, but remember to sit still. We're guests, not the stars of the show. Caleb Fisher propped his chin on his hand and whispered, I think I could be a secret superhero. I'll protect the bride from the bad guys. What bad guys? Nora raised a brow. The ones who don't let her eat wedding cake. Caleb Fisher replied matter-of-factly, making. Nora burst out laughing, almost choking on her orange juice. That was charm. Nora's charm. Life had never been easy, juggling double shifts at a cafe, paying rent, caring for Caleb Fisher. But she had held on to her playfulness and humor. Her clumsy moments, quick jokes, and radiant smile had become a fragile armor against hardship. While Nora was lost in thought about next month's utility bills. Caleb Fisher suddenly dropped his spoonful of ice cream and pointed toward the VIP section. Mommy, look. That chair is so cool. Nora looked up. In the center of the dazzling ballroom, where everyone could see, a man sat silently in a gleaming wheelchair. Golden light spilled across neatly cropped dark hair. A black tuxedo stretched perfectly over broad shoulders. He wasn't smiling. His gray eyes, like a winter sky, stared off in the distance, not settling on anyone. Nora's heart skipped. Something about his posture made her chest tighten. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. For years, she had grown used to being apart. Friends drifting away after she chose to keep Caleb Fisher when his father disappeared. Family blaming her for ruining her future. And now at this joyous wedding, she was still at the last table, sitting quietly with her son. Her eyes met the man's for just a second, but it felt like he could see right through her. Mommy, why isn't anyone sitting with him? Fisher tilted his head, voice innocent. Maybe they're uncomfortable. Nora whispered back. Uncomfortable about what? He's got the coolest chair here. I want to try it. Nora gave a nervous laugh, shaking her head. No, Caleb Fisher. That's not a toy. But the boy kept staring, his wide eyes brimming with curiosity adults had long since lost. Nora turned away, focusing on her plate, but inside she was unsettled. The image of that man lingered. Why did a famous billionaire look so utterly alone? Why did his eyes resemble hers that day of graduation, when she stood outside the campus, watching friends embrace while she stood by herself, 8 months pregnant? The waltz shifted into a lively swing. The MC invited everyone onto the dance floor. Applause, cheers, footsteps filled the hall. Everywhere glowed with joy, except for the last table in the VIP table. Both remained silent. Nora glanced at her son. Caleb Fisher clapped along with the music, but his gaze kept flicking back to the man in the wheelchair. He whispered, "Mommy, I think he needs a dance partner." Nora froze, then laughed. "Sweetheart, how could he dance?" Caleb Fisher wrinkled his nose and whispered firmly, "Dancing doesn't need legs. You just need someone who wants to dance with you." The innocence of his words shook Nora's heart. She turned her head. The man still sat motionless, eyes half closed, as if the world had no place for him. A strange impulse rose inside her, not pity, but a mischievous, daring thought. That was Nora. Clumsy, but always bold enough to do what others wouldn't. She took a sip of wine, feeling her face flush. Her heart raced as if she were about to do something reckless. Caleb Fisher leaned closer and whispered, "Mommy, I bet he'll smile if you talk to him." Nora sighed, biting her lip. A voice inside warned, "Fields, don't be foolish. Who is he, a stranger? A billionaire, a man in a wheelchair?" But then another voice whispered stronger, "So what? A smile cost nothing. And maybe, just maybe, it could save someone." Nora blinked, looked at her son, then at the man again. In that fleeting moment, she knew one thing for sure. Fate had just placed her inside the story. The music shifted into a tender love song, the lights dimming to spotlight the dance floor. Couples flowed out hand in hand. White gowns spun in the arms of black tuxedos, happy laughter mingling with the lingering notes of violins. At the VIP table, Jonathan Sinclair remained still, his wheelchair standing out among the rows of silk-covered chairs. No one came near. There were stolen glances from afar, plenty of whispers, but not a single person dared to approach. He was used to it. For the past 2 years, silence had been his only companion at parties. People came to shake his hand, exchange a few polite words, then slipped away quickly, leaving him with his solitude. A bitter thought struck him. A CEO who can't even find a dance partner at his own event. Pathetic. Jonathan took a sip of champagne, the bitterness on his tongue blending with the ache in his chest. He wondered if he should leave early. At the last table, Nora Fields still watched him. Her heart raced as if some invisible string was pulling her toward that man. She wasn't the impulsive type, but her playful streak sometimes drove her to do things no one expected, especially when Caleb Fisher. Her little boy tilted his head and whispered, his eyes sparkling, "Mommy, I think he needs a friend. Why don't you be his friend?" Nora laughed, shaking her head. "Sweetheart, I don't even know him." "But do you know anyone else here?" Caleb Fisher asked innocently. The question caught her off guard. True. In this glittering room, she was just as alone as he was. A reckless thought flashed in her mind before she could overthink it. Nora set down her glass and took a deep breath. "Well, one crazy move won't kill me." She stood up, crossing between tables, her heels tapped softly against the wooden floor. Curious eyes followed her, silently asking, "What is that girl from the last table doing?" Jonathan noticed the woman approaching. He raised a brow. Familiar scenarios ran through his mind. She would offer pity or suggest help. He was tired of both, but Nora stopped in front of him, leaned slightly forward, and smiled. Her brown eyes sparkled with mischief. Then, in a gentle yet steady voice, she asked, "Would you like to be my date tonight?" The entire ballroom seemed to go silent. Jonathan froze. He thought he'd misheard a date. A young, simple woman was asking him that right here in front of a crowd that treated him like a display piece. He looked into her eyes, searching for pity. But there was none. Only genuine brightness in a playful challenge. "You are joking, right?" he muttered, voice low and rough. Nora chuckled, tilting her head. "Maybe. But if you say no, you'll ruin the best entrance I've had all night." For a moment, silence stretched. Then the unthinkable. Jonathan laughed. The sound was rough, low, awkward, like even he had forgotten he still could. How long had it been? 6 months? A year? He couldn't remember. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Whispers erupted. "Who is she? Oh my God! Is this pity? But did you see that?" He actually laughed. Jonathan set his champagne down and pressed his palm against the edge of the table. A sudden decision lit inside him. He looked up, lips curling faintly. "All right then, miss." "Nora." She answered quickly, her smile radiant. "Nora Fields. And tonight, you're my date." Before he could argue, Nora slipped her arm around, resting her hand naturally on the armrest of his chair. "Shall we?" The whispers burst into a roar. Shocked stares and astonished eyes followed as the girl from the last table wheeled the billionaire out of the shadows and toward the glowing dance floor. Jonathan sat in silence, letting her guide him. Yet his heartbeat had changed, not because the wheels turned beneath him, but because for the first time in months, he no longer felt alone. He looked up and caught Nora Moss's radiant gaze under the lights. A small spark found its way into his hardened heart. Perhaps tonight would not be like any other night. The lively music filled the hall, lights glittering as they spun across the polished wooden floor. Couples moved gracefully, with the rhythm forming a dazzling circle. And in the middle of it all, Nora and Pot Jonathan, in his wheelchair, drew every gaze in the room. Some people whispered, a few eyes looked pitying, others curious, even mocking. But Nora didn't care. She held her head high, her smile radiant, her hands steady on the wheelchair handles, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Ready, Mr. Sinclair?" she murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. Jonathan arched a brow. Ready to be stared at like an animal in a cage. "No." Nora chuckled, her eyes sparkling. "Ready to become the star of this dance floor." Jonathan shook his head with a faint, helpless smile. He didn't know why he let her drag him into this madness. But one thing was certain. It had been a very long time since his heart beat this fast. The music surged. Nora suddenly spun his wheelchair in a circle, like a dancer twirling on the floor. Her blue dress flared lightly, and her brown hair glimmered under the lights. The crowd gasped. Jonathan gripped the armrest, startled. "Are you trying to turn me into a race car?" Nora teased, grinning mischievously. "You're my partner, and this chair is the best pair of legs tonight." She pushed him forward, then pulled back, spun again with grace. Jonathan felt his body moving in rhythm not passively, but as part of it. The sensation was foreign. For months he had sat immobile watching life from the sidelines. But now, under tow. Nora's hands, he was inside the dance itself. Laughter broke out. Children cheered. Adults, after a moment of surprise, began clapping along. Not pity anymore, but delighted amazement. "See who?" Nora whispered as she leaned closer, her face near his. "You can dance. You just needed the right partner." Their eyes locked. Warmth pierced through the ice that had caged Jonathan's heart for years. And then a high-pitched voice rang out. "Mommy, I want to dance too." Caleb Fisher darted from the last table straight into the circle, a white napkin tied around his neck like a superhero cape. "Hey, mister, let me dance with you." Jonathan burst into real laughter, full deep, shaking his chest. "And what am I supposed to do, kiddo?" "Easy." Caleb Fisher announced solemnly as he climbed behind the chair, grabbing the handles with, "Nora, I'll be your extra engine." The ballroom erupted in laughter. Nora pretended to sigh in exasperation, but her eyes brimmed with joy. "All right then, gentlemen, let's show the world how we can dance." And so under the crystal lights an unforgettable scene unfolded. A man in a wheelchair, a young woman filled with light, and a lively 6-year-old boy turning the dance floor into their stage. Nora spun the chair. Caleb Fisher shouted, "Vroom, vroom," at the top of his lungs until Jonathan laughed without stopping. Applause thundered. Cheers rose. The whispers of pity dissolved, replaced by admiration, by awe. In that moment, Jonathan realized something. Nora wasn't looking at him as a disabled man, not as a fallen CEO, not as someone abandoned. In her eyes, he was simply a man. A man who could laugh, who could live, who could bring joy to a child. The feeling was so strong it tightened his chest. The music ended on a long, lingering chord. Nora stopped the chair, bending low in a dancer's bow. Caleb Fisher spread his arms wide and shouted, "Ta-da!" The ballroom exploded in applause. Jonathan looked around, lips curved in a smile, eyes lit with something even he didn't recognize. Genuine happiness. He turned to Nora and whispered just for her, "Thank you. It's been so long since I felt alive." Nora met his gaze warm and tender. "You're not just alive." "Jonathan, you're shining." And in that moment, the rest of the world blurred away. Only the three of them remained, a small circle, but enough for Jonathan to believe that life could begin again. After the final round of applause, the music softened into gentle jazz. The dance floor cleared. Bent down and whispered to Caleb Fisher, "Want to get some fresh air, superhero?" The boy nodded, clutching a cupcake he just claimed, his eyes still glowing with pride from being the extra engine. She turned to Jonathan. "Would you like to step out to the garden? There are string lights there, and no whispering people." Jonathan K's lips curved into a rare smile, one that no longer felt so foreign tonight. "Sounds like heaven." A side door opened, letting in the night breeze. A stone path led to a small garden where golden string lights draped from tree branches, scattering soft, honey-colored light across the grass. From afar, laughter and clinking glasses still echoed. But here everything felt gentler, like a warm blanket laid over a long day. Nora Moss walked slowly, letting Jonathan's wheelchair roll smoothly along the path. Caleb Fisher darted back and forth, chasing fireflies, proudly holding up his cupcake each time he missed. I'm not eating it yet. I'm saving it for when I'm really hungry. Nora laughed. Eat half now. Save the other half for when you're super hungry. Watching them, Jonathan felt something inside him loosen, as if watered after a drought. There was something simple in the way they lived, as if happiness wasn't a luxury, but knowing how to split a cupcake in two and laugh about it. They stopped by a wooden bench. Nora sat down, placing her small purse beside her, tilting her face up to the breeze. Jonathan rolled close to the bench, head tilted toward the night sky stray with drifting clouds. Thank you for the dance, he said, first his voice low and warm. Or the glide, to be exact. He glanced at his wheels with a crooked smile. You're welcome. I just pulled you into the party you deserve to be part of. Nora replied, her brown eyes suddenly serious. It's hard when everyone looks at you like a sad story. Jonathan stayed quiet for a moment. The wind stirred the hair at his temple, making the lights overhead sway with a faint chime. After the accident, he began. I suddenly became someone else in everyone's eyes. First, it was the doctors talking about endless rehab years. Then my fiancée, she said she was sorry, said she wasn't strong enough. She left quickly, as if staying would drag her down with me. The laughter from the hall faded. Nora just listened. Jonathan drew in a breath and went on. Friends at first, they texted, "You okay, man? Need anything? Let me know." Then it went quiet. I guess it makes sense. I was the one inviting people to parties, the one they saw at the head table. When I couldn't stand anymore, maybe they didn't know where to stand in my life either. He gave a short laugh, not bitter, just tired. So the rehab center became the only place I went regularly. The smell of antiseptic, the machines pulling at my muscles, the same exercises over and over. I once managed billion-dollar deals, yet I had to relearn how to transfer from a wheelchair to a bed without falling. Nora's throat tightened. She pictured a man who had once ridden horses with pride, who had stood on stages, now practicing how to roll over on a stiff mattress and call it progress. Softly, she said, "But you didn't give up." Jonathan's lips curved faintly. Some days I wanted to, but tonight, he paused, glancing at Caleb Fisher, who was sitting in the grass, carefully splitting his cupcake in two, eating half, and wrapping the other in a napkin. Tonight it feels like I've learned something else, that a party only really begins when you decide to stay. Nora chuckled softly. And I learned a wheelchair can turn into a dance partner if you ignore the way people stare. They sat in silence for a few seconds. The breeze carried the smell of damp leaves, and somewhere nearby, a cricket chirped. What about you? Jonathan tilted his head. You don't seem like someone who'd strike up a conversation with a stranger, especially a noisy one like me. He tapped the chair lightly, joking to lighten the mood. Nora pressed her lips together, her hands tightening and loosening in her lap. I was left behind too, she said, carefully choosing each word. Not in an accident. At a wedding. My own. Jonathan turned fully, his gray eyes darkening. That day, Nora continued. The flowers were baby's breath. The dress borrowed from my cousin was a little loose at the shoulders. I stood behind the thin curtain of the hall, holding the bouquet as the music began. Everyone buzzing, my mother whispering, "Sweetheart, keep smiling." Then the groom's phone rang. She laughed dryly. I couldn't hear the other side, just saw his face change. A moment later he came to me and apologized. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. Her voice caught. I was already pregnant with Caleb Fisher. Jonathan let out a long breath. Did you stay in the hall? I walked out through the back door. Nora lifted her eyes to the string lights. I thought I'd escape the humiliation, but it followed me for years. The neighbors looks, my parents' what-ifs, the double shifts just to make rent. I guess I got used to sitting at the last table where no one calls your name. She glanced at the grass, her smile oddly soft. Funny, isn't it? Tonight you sat alone at the VIP table and I sat alone by the door. Both of us abandoned at a wedding. Jonathan laughed a laugh with tears hiding somewhere behind it. I was the abandoned guest and you were the abandoned bride. His voice shifted, slipping naturally into you instead of Miss Fields, as if their stories had closed the gap. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. Yeah. Nora shrugged. If life were a movie, this would be the part where the writer shoves two people into the same quiet hallway to breathe. She winked, borrowing playfulness to mask the sting at her eyes. A loud slurp broke the moment. Caleb Fisher looked up, crumbs on his face, eyes wide. Mommy, I ate the part I was saving. Nora and Jonathan exchanged a look, then laughed together. Nora handed him a napkin, pretending to scold. That's fine. When we're super hungry, we'll just eat the wind. What does wind taste like? Caleb Fisher asked curiously. Freedom. Jonathan answered, making Caleb Fisher nod solemnly as if he understood perfectly. The light moment drifted by. Nora turned back to Jonathan, her voice gentle. You know, I used to hate rooms with too many bright lights. They made every flaw feel magnified. But here with these string lights, I just see a path lit enough to keep walking. Jonathan touched the rim of his wheel, his fingers trembling slightly, as if brushing against something fragile. And me, he whispered. For the first time in 2 years, I'm not afraid to go back inside. Because now I know someone will look at me and see a man, not a tragedy. Nora looked at him for a long moment, her eyes slowly softening. I don't see you as a tragedy. Jonathan, I see a man learning to redefine what it means to stand. Whether sitting or standing, it still belongs to you. Another breeze carried the scent of jasmine. From inside, the MC called everyone to the stage for the bouquet toss. Caleb Fisher leapt up. Mommy, let's go catch the flowers for Mr. Hall. Jonathan. The innocent suggestion made both adults laugh. Good idea, Nora said, patting his shoulder. But I think Mr. Jonathan needs a different kind of flower. What kind? Caleb Fisher asked. Jonathan thought for a moment, then said, half joking, half true, the kind you don't toss, the kind you place in someone's hands. All three fell quiet, letting the words rest under the lights. Not a promise, not a dream, just a possibility. And that was enough warmth. Let's go back in, Nora said gently but firmly. We've stood outside long enough. She paused, glancing at Jonathan, as if worried about her choice of words. But he smiled and shook his head reassuringly. Yes, back in, he echoed, giving his wheel a push. Tonight, I don't plan to sit alone at a table again. Caleb Fisher ran ahead, waving his empty cupcake wrapper like a flag. Nora walked behind. Jonathan, her hand resting on the chair's handle, not to push, but to stand beside him. The door opened. Music rushed out. Light spilled over their faces. And in the sea of people, they no longer felt lost. A deep connection had taken root. Not through vows, but through their shared choice to return to the bright room. This time, neither would leave the other behind. The next morning, the little cafe on Maple Street was busier than usual. The aroma of freshly roasted coffee mingled with the scent of warm waffles, blending into the clatter of grinders and the soft chime of spoons against cups. Behind the counter, Nora tied the faded brown apron tighter and greeted a regular who always ordered a low foam latte. She'd worked part-time here for 2 years, juggling it with evening shifts at the bookstore to cover expenses. Still, every morning she wore the same bright smile as if no burden ever weighed on her shoulders. Suddenly a stir rose at the door. A flower deliveryman walked in, arms full of a bouquet so large it hit his face. Crimson roses mixed with baby's breath, elegantly wrapped in craft paper. Fortune. Nora Fields. The delivery man cleared his throat. The whole cafe turned. Nora's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. She accepted the bouquet, her hands trembling slightly, and pulled out the small card tucked inside. It read only one line. The man you asked to be your date at the wedding. No name, no signature. Nora let out a startled laugh. Around her, customers whispered, glancing with curiosity. She covered her mouth, her cheeks burning hot. Mommy? Caleb Fisher leapt up from the corner table, eyes wide as saucers. It's from the wheelchair man, isn't it? I knew it. I told you he liked you. The whole cafe burst out laughing. Nora quickly set the bouquet on the counter, ruffling her son's hair. Caleb Fisher, hush. But inside warmth bloomed. It had been so long since someone remembered her in such a sweet way. That afternoon, after her shift ended, Nora still couldn't stop glancing at the bouquet. A coworker teased, "So are you going tonight? A billionaire in a wheelchair, more romantic than any drama series." Nora blushed, but eventually pulled out her phone and typed a message to the number written on the card. "I'm free tonight. Where do you want to go, Mr. Sinclair?" The reply came instantly, as if he had been waiting. "Somewhere roses aren't trampled by high heels. I'll pick you up at 7. Nora laughed out loud, unable to hide her nervous excitement. The restaurant Jonathan chose wasn't a glittering high-end venue, but a small Italian place by the river with wooden tables and golden candlelight. No paparazzi, no VIPs, just the scent of baking pizza and the strum of a warm guitar. Jonathan was already at the table when Nora arrived, dressed in a simple navy suit. The wheelchair was still there, but tonight his gaze carried a calmer ease. "You beat me here," Nora teased as she sat down. Habit of someone who always likes to be in control. Jonathan replied, then arched a brow. "But I think I've been losing control since I agreed to be your date." Nora laughed. "That's a quick confession." He took a sip of wine, pretending to be cool. "Think of it as an after-hours business meeting." "Oh, then I should charge you consulting fees." Nora winked. Jonathan, nearly choked on his wine, the cold CEO undone by her carefree humor. He coughed lightly, then couldn't help but laugh. Caleb Fisher sat beside his mother, studying the menu with serious eyes. "Mommy, they have spaghetti with meatballs. I want that, but I think Mr. Chef Jonathan's should eat pizza. Pizza's easier to cut. Are you trying to manage his meal?" Nora teased. "No, I'm the matchmaker." Caleb Fisher said matter-of-factly, "If you both eat the same thing, you'll match better, so it's easier to fall in love." Jonathan almost choked again. He looked at Nora, catching her blushing and laughing at the same time, her eyes sparkling. In that instant, he didn't just see a weary single mother. He saw a radiant, captivating woman. Throughout dinner, Jonathan tried to keep his composure, but Nora kept breaking down his walls. "Do you often send flowers to women?" she asked, cutting into her lasagna. "No," he answered curtly. "Then I suppose you send checks instead." Jonathan's head shot up, surprised, before he burst out laughing. "Yes, and they call me practical. Well, I like flowers better. They're cheaper but truer." Nora said softly. He paused, then admitted quietly, "Truer. I'd forgotten what that felt like." Just then, Caleb Fisher chimed in. "You're smiling more than yesterday, Mr. Chama, Jonathan. Mommy made you smile." Jonathan looked at the boy, then back at Nora. Her eyes flickered with shyness, but also with a gentle glow, like a secret just revealed. Dinner ended with sweet tiramisu. Jonathan set down his spoon and looked straight at Nora. "Thank you for coming. I think I'd forgotten how much fun conversation could be." Nora shrugged with a small smile. "Thank you for the flowers. I think I'd forgotten how it felt to be remembered." In that moment, no music or lights were needed. The connection simply existed. Caleb Fisher yawned, rubbing his eyes, but still managed to add, "Send flowers again tomorrow. Okay, Mommy really likes them." Both adults laughed. Jonathan leaned closer, speaking low so only Nora could hear. "If you want, I'll send them every day." Nora met his eyes, her heart skipping. For the first time in years, she felt like a woman again, not just a single mother. Soul Stories fam. If you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands are listening and sharing together. That morning, Jonathan woke in his silent penthouse. Pale sunlight slipped through the heavy curtains, but it couldn't drive away the gloom hanging over him. His phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand. It was Aunt Eli Davis, his assistant, sounding urgent. "Mr. Sinclair, the press, they all ran the story this morning. You'd better prepare yourself." Jonathan frowned. "What story?" Eli Davis hesitated, then delivered the blow. "Billionaire in a wheelchair, pied by a poor single mother." Jonathan gripped the phone tight, each word slicing into an unhealed wound. He opened his tablet. Headlines screamed back at him, splashed with photos of him laughing on the dance floor beside Nora and Caleb Fisher. That rare smile of his, instead of being proof of joy, was twisted into fuel for gossip and pity. "Even the smallest happiness is turned into a joke," he muttered, voice hoarse. The whole day he spiraled. All his deepest fears, the pitying looks, the cruel whispers, now lay bare. And worse, Nora and Caleb Fisher were dragged into it. I was wrong to pull them into this. They don't deserve to sink in my mud. When chapter Nora called that afternoon, inviting him for a walk with Caleb Fisher. He shut her down with a cold reply. I'm busy. I'll be in touch. Nora froze. She heard it in the distance in his voice, the same tone she despised in those who had turned their backs on her. That night, Nora Mao couldn't take it anymore. She dropped Caleb Fisher off with the neighbor and went straight to Jonathan Shaw's penthouse. He sat by the glass wall, the wheelchair as silent as part of his body. The screen before him still glared with the articles. When he saw her, he startled, then frowned. You shouldn't have come. Arms crossed. Nora. His brown eyes blazed. Then where should I be, sitting in the cafe reading those cheap headlines and pretending to believe them? Jonathan turned away, voice taut. Paul. You don't understand. The media, they can crush a life. I've lived with it. But you and Caleb Fisher, I can't let you be dragged in. Nora stepped closer, her voice almost a challenge. Do you think I'm that fragile? My fiancé left me at the altar. I've raised my son alone for 6 years, and you think a few tabloid headlines can scare me off? Jonathan bit his lip. His eyes glimmered with torment. Nora, you don't get it. They'll say you're only with me out of pity. Or worse, for money. You don't deserve that. Her breath caught. The words cut. For a moment, her heart ached. Then she exhaled sharply, voice trembling with fury. You really think that's why I chose you out of pity? Jonathan said nothing. Nora stepped closer, eyes shining with tears. Listen to me. Jonathan Sinclair. I don't pity you. I choose you because you make me laugh. Because you make me feel respected. Because when I'm with you, I'm not just the abandoned single mom. I feel like a woman and you are a man. The words fell heavy like a hammer breaking stone. Jonathan's gray eyes flickered shaken. His voice cracked. Memories pounded. Brianna Kane, walking away. Friends fading. Endless hours of failed therapy. He had built walls around himself, convinced no one truly wanted to stay. But Nora's words split those walls wide open. You want to push me away. Nora's voice wavered, but her resolve was still. Fine, but be honest. Are you doing it to protect me or to protect your own pride and fear? Jonathan froze. The question struck deep. He did want to protect her, but he was also afraid. Afraid she'd leave like the others, so he thought he'd shove her away first. His shoulders trembled. I don't know what to believe anymore. Nora. Everyone has left me. Nora placed her hand firmly on his, her tone gentler but unyielding. I'm not everyone, and I'm not leaving unless you make me. The tension snapped the air tight, and for the first time in 2 years. Jonathan felt tears rise. He turned away, but Nora saw. Silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of city traffic below. At last, Jonathan exhaled, dropping the armor. I'm terrified. Terrified of losing you before I even truly have you. Nora squeezed his hand. Then don't lose me. It's that simple. He looked up, and in her eyes he saw no pity, no hesitation, only a fierce steadiness, the same strength that had carried her through years of single motherhood. And in that moment, Jonathan understood. If he kept hiding behind the walls of fear, he would lose her, and this time he would never forgive himself. Their fight was not gentle. It was raw and painful, leaving both of them shaken. But in those cracks, light seeped in. Jonathan realized that to love and to be loved, he would have to let those walls fall. That night, Nora left with her shoulders taut, but her gaze steady. Jonathan remained staring out over the city. For the first time in years, the sky above didn't look like only darkness. The Sinclair Capital boardroom was strung as tight as a bow. On the giant screen, a report detailing gaps in the deal with their Japanese partner, the Nakamura Group, glowed. A project once expected to bring in billions and serve as a springboard into the Asian market now sat at a standstill. Tyler Vaughn, a longtime shareholder, leaned heavily on the table, his tone grave. Mr. Sinclair, the Japanese value presence. You cannot personally travel to Tokyo nor take part in their rituals. That is why they hesitate. We cannot allow this company to be held back simply because of your condition. My condition. Jonathan repeated, his gray eyes turning to ice. A younger shareholder cut in. Forgive me, but it's the truth. Business waits for no one. Sinclair needs someone who can stand walk, someone who shows strength to our partners. The room went silent. Chop-tum. Jonathan Shom gripped the rim of his wheels, the sting of humiliation burning like an old wound torn open. It felt as if all his intellect and effort had been erased, reduced to two useless legs. Then, Eli Davis, his assistant, broke the silence. The Nakamura delegation is currently in New York. They've asked for a private dinner before making their final decision. All eyes shifted to Jonathan. This was his last chance. If it failed, the board would have the perfect excuse to demand he step aside. Jonathan nodded, his voice steady and low. I'll meet them. The riverside Japanese restaurant exuded elegance with tatami mats, delicate decor, and the faint fragrance of green tea. Jonathan rolled in. Nora at his side in a simple cream-colored dress. It wasn't glamorous, but it radiated quiet grace. Eli Davis leaned in and whispered, Miss Fields can help if they need soft translation. And to set the tone, Nora smiled. I only came for the sushi, but if saving a company is on the menu, I'm ready. Jonathan chuckled for the first time that day, and the tension eased. At the head of the table sat Mr. Nakamura, a stern middle-aged man, and his wife. They bowed politely, their eyes sharp and observant. The opening conversation was heavy. Jonathan laid out vision, numbers, and strategy. Yet, Mr. Nakamura's face stayed unmoved, his words few, his glances slipping now and then to his wife in Japanese. The board had been partly right. The image of a CEO in a wheelchair lacked the kind of force they expected. Nora noticed, and when the sashimi arrived, she leaned forward. With her chopsticks, she clumsily dropped a slice of fish into her soy dish, splashing it. Oh no, she laughed. I've been practicing for 3 weeks and still can't master this. Mr. Nakamura, do you have any secrets so I don't keep turning sushi into soup for the first time? Mrs. Nakamura covered her mouth, giggling. Mr. Nakamura's stern face softened as he glanced at his wife. Ms. Fields in Japan. We believe it takes a lifetime to truly master chopsticks. You are still young. You have plenty of time. The table laughed. The tension eased. Nora went on warmly. Luckily, I'm not here to prove I'm good with chopsticks. I'm here because I believe this company and the man beside me know how to grasp what really matters. Not legs, but vision. Her words landed. Mrs. Nakamura's eyes lit up and she whispered something to her husband. Mr. Nakamura paused, then gave the faintest nod. Jonathan seized the moment, laying out the mutual benefits. This time, Mr. Nakamura listened intently, no longer staring at the chair, but at the man who spoke with conviction. At the close of dinner, when tea was poured, Mr. Nakamura said slowly, Sinclair Capital has a leader who listens and an ally who inspires trust. I believe we can sign. Jonathan Xi's grip tightened on the armrest, his pulse racing. He bowed deeply, his voice steady. Arao Gimasu. Mrs. Nakamura turned to Kasum. Nora. With a warm smile. Thank you for bringing warmth to this evening. Back in the car. Jonathan sat quietly for a long moment. The city lights shimmered across the river, mirrored in his eyes. Nora, he said softly. Do you realize what you just did? You saved an entire company. Nora laughed. No, I just dropped a piece of sashimi. Jonathan laughed out loud. A rare sound, lighter than it had been in years. Looking at her for the first time, he didn't feel like a burden in business. Instead, he saw a partner, someone who could stand in the middle of cold numbers and breathe warmth into them. In his heart, one truth rang clear. Nora didn't just bring him smiles. She gave him the strength to keep standing in his own way. The physical therapy room gleamed with bright lights, the sharp scent of antiseptic mingling with the heat of menthol balm. Parallel steel bars stretched across the room where patients practiced one shaky step at a time. Machines hummed, wheels creaked against the floor. Jonathan sat at the edge of his wheelchair, sweat already beading on his temple, though he hadn't moved yet. His therapist, Jason Lee, stood nearby, stern but patient. Mr. Sinclair, today we'll try standing. No steps, just standing. I'll be right here. Jonathan gave a slight nod. His large hands clenched the chair's frame, veins rising. He had been waiting for this day, the day he would finally test his body against the prison of the chair. From the corner, Nora watched her heart pounding. Ever since she'd met him, she had seen how his gray eyes masked so much pride. And today, those eyes burned again with hope and fear. Ready, Jason Lee said. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan Sauton pushed with his arms, summoning every ounce of strength into his long-forgotten legs. Muscles trembled, sweat dripped onto the floor. For a split second, his knees felt taut, as if they remembered the function they had abandoned. Then thud. His body collapsed. Jonathan fell hard, his knees striking the floor with a brutal crack. Jonathan! Nora! Cried, rushing forward. He braced his hands, but they shook too violently to hold him up. His face twisted, his breath ragged like a cornered animal. Enough! Jonathan! Roared, his voice raw. I can't do it! I'm nothing but in a chair. All this effort is pointless. The words rang harshly, echoing off the sterile walls. Jason Lee started forward, but Nora was already kneeling in front of Jonathan, wrapping her arms around him. He trembled violently in her embrace, anger, despair, and agony colliding inside him. His chest heaved, his breath breaking, as if he wanted to sob but refused. Nora held him tighter, her voice breaking, but strangely laughing at the same time. Enough to stop and Jason Lee in his tracks. Listen to me, Jonathan. If you spend the rest of your life in that chair, I'll still be here. Do you understand? I'm with you for you, not for your legs. Jonathan froze. Tears spilled down. Nora's cheeks dampening his shoulder. But if you want to walk, then I'll walk with you. Step by step, slowly stumbling. I'll still be here. No effort is wasted. As long as you keep trying. The room went quiet, filled only with muffled sobs. Jonathan shut his eyes, letting the first tears in years fall, sliding into Nora's hair. For the first time, he let himself break, and for the first time, he believed he didn't have to fight alone. Jason Lee turned away, pretending to be busy with equipment, leaving them the space they needed. Nora pressed closer, her heartbeat pounding against his. You don't need to be perfect, Jonathan. You just need to be yourself, and if you need it, I'll be the legs you can lean on. A hoarse laugh burst from him between the tears. You're insane. Yeah. Nora whispered back, laughing through her tears. But the right kind of insane, and I'm not leaving you. In that moment, Jonathan felt the darkness inside him crack just enough for light to seep through. Not the light of promises that he'd walk again overnight, but the light of hope, the light of love without conditions. He lifted his head and met Nora's gaze, and for the first time in his life he believed that even if his legs never moved again, he could still keep moving forward, because beside him was someone who would always place her hand in his and walk the whole road with him. The ballroom of the Metropole Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers. On tables draped in pristine white linens sat bouquets of yellow roses mingled with hydrangea, anger flowers, symbolizing faith and gratitude. Tonight, Jonathan Sinclair's name was behind a charity gala for orphans, his first public appearance in years after retreating from the press. At a table near the stage, Nora gently squeezed her son's hand. Caleb Fisher gazed around with wide, shining eyes, whispering, Mommy, everyone here looks like they're in a movie. Do I need to bow or something? Nora laughed, straightening his tiny tie. No, sweetheart. Just smile. Your smile makes everyone happy. From across the room, Jonathan wheeled toward them, his face calm though his eyes betrayed a flicker of nerves. But when he saw Nora and Caleb Fisher, his shoulders eased and the faintest smile broke through. You came, he said softly. Of course. Nora replied, her warm brown eyes steady. This is your night. On stage, the spotlight beamed down on the wooden podium. Jonathan rolled up and the murmurs in the ballroom fell away. The image of a CEO in a wheelchair, once fodder for ridicule, now drew silence and expectation. Thank you all for being here, his deep voice carried firm and clear. I once believed that when my legs could no longer hold me, I had nothing left to give. But I've learned that we can always give with our hearts, with our minds, and with our faith. Tonight, I want to give that faith to the children who never had a choice in their circumstances. Applause thundered, cameras flashed. As Jonathan Cha continued his speech. Caleb Fisher, who had been sitting still, suddenly bounded onto the stage. Nora gasped, leapt to her feet. But before she could stop him, the boy grabbed Jonathan Shaw's hand and tugged the microphone down to his level. Hello, everybody. Caleb Fisher's small voice rang out high but firm. I'm Caleb Fisher. I came here with Mommy. He paused, turned to Jonathan, his eyes shimmering with emotion. With Dad for today. The entire hall froze. Then a wave of laughter and soft gas rolled through, touched with awe. Cameras fired in bursts, capturing the 6-year-old, hugging the arm of the man in the wheelchair, with proud innocence. Jonathan's heart clenched. For a moment he couldn't breathe. No one had ever called him Dad before. And now, from the lips of a child he already loved like his own. It felt like the most sacred word in the world. He bent down his hand, resting firmly on Caleb Fisher's small shoulder. His voice cracked, but carried. And I'm proud to be your dad. Not just today. The ballroom erupted into applause. Nora rushed on stage, scooping Caleb Fisher, up her cheeks red with panic. Caleb Fisher, what are you doing? This isn't. But Jonathan raised a hand, stopping her, his eyes locked on Nora's, unflinching for the first time under the blaze of hundreds of flashing lights. He clasped her hand tightly. His voice echoed through the hall. I want everyone here to know family isn't always written in blood. Sometimes it's a choice. And tonight I choose her and this boy as my family. For one breathless second, silence hung. Then the entire hall rose to its feet. Applause crashing like waves. Many wiped tears from their eyes. In the front row, Mrs. Nakamura smiled, nodding her approval. Cameras flared, seizing the image of a billionaire in a wheelchair holding hands with a simple woman and her child, an image warmer than any speech. Later, when the crowd had dispersed, Nora sat with Jonathan in a quiet hallway, her cheeks still burned. You just told an entire ballroom that Caleb Fisher and I are your family. Do you know what the press will say? Jonathan turned to her with a smile, his expression unguarded, gentle. Let them write. For once, I want the press to tell the truth. Nora couldn't find words. Under the golden glow of the sconces, his face no longer carried its cold armor. Only warmth, only peace. Caleb Fisher rested his head on Jonathan's shoulder, eyelids heavy. See, I was right, Daddy. Jonathan chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to the boy's messy hair. Yes, Daddy's right here. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. The little cafe on Maple Street was more radiant than ever that night. Golden string lights draped across the wooden ceiling, while the tables and chairs had been pushed aside, leaving a wide open space in the center. On the bar jars of white baby's breath mixed with crimson roses released a gentle fragrance. Nora stepped inside, slightly taken aback. She had just finished her shift at the bookstore and was still in her simple, pale blue dress. The cafe felt both achingly familiar and strangely transformed. Her heart raced. "Mommy, look." Caleb Fisher tugged her hand excitedly. He beamed when he spotted a small circle of familiar faces. A few of Jonathan True's close colleagues, even Eli Davis, his personal assistant. All of them smiled knowingly, their eyes gleaming as if they were in on a secret about to unfold. In the middle of the room sat Jonathan, a sleek black suit, neatly combed hair, and in his hands a vibrant bouquet of flowers. He wasn't the cold CEO of Sinclair Capital, nor the lonely man at the VIP table she had once seen. He was Jonathan, the man who had stepped into Nora's life and lit it up. When their eyes met, Nora's breath caught. She knew something was coming, but nothing could prepare her for the wave of emotion that followed. Jonathan wheeled forward, his steel-gray eyes locking onto hers. He extended the bouquet, his deep voice carrying through the quiet cafe, husky with emotion. "The last time you invited me to be your date at a wedding. Tonight let me invite you to be my partner for life." The cafe fell into stunned silence. For a moment, Nora could only stand there, her hands trembling. Tears welled, blurring her vision. Her heart tightened, then burst open into a happiness she had never known. "Jonathan," she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked at her eyes, shining, stripped of every barrier. "Nora, I don't know how far I can go, but I do know this. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. With you and Caleb Fisher." Nora burst into tears, nodding repeatedly, her lips trembling into a radiant smile. "Yes, yes, I will." The cafe erupted in applause. Eli Davis whistled. Nora's friends hugged one another, eyes glistening. Caleb Fisher leapt into the air, shouting at the top of his lungs, "I finally have a dad!" Laughter rippled through the room, mixed with tears. Nora hugged her son tightly, then turned to throw her arms around Jonathan, her shoulders shaking with joy. Jonathan wrapped her in his arms, holding her as if he'd never let go. In that moment, there was no wheelchair, no pitying stares, only the family he had chosen. When the crowd gave them space, Nora knelt so she was level with his eyes. "Do you have any idea how much you just melted my heart?" Jonathan's smile softened, his gaze tender. "I know, and I hope I can do that every single day for the rest of our lives." Nora laughed through her tears, pressing her forehead gently against his. "You already have." No one in the cafe knew that beyond the bouquet and the proposal, Jonathan held a secret of his own. After months of therapy, his legs had begun to show signs of progress. The attempts to stand the painful, falls, the tears. Nora had caught on her shoulder. All of it was starting to yield results. But he didn't say a word. He wanted to keep it until another day. The day of their real wedding, the day he would rise not only in her heart, but before everyone's eyes. The bells rang out clear and bright, echoing through the old cathedral. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting a shimmering rainbow effect on the aisle. Everyone turned hushed as the bride appeared. Nora walked in her simple wedding gown, unadorned with glitter, but radiant beyond measure. Her smile shone like a guiding light. With every step she took, white petals floated to the ground, sketching a path of happiness. At the end of the aisle, Jonathan waited in his familiar wheelchair. His black tuxedo framed his broad shoulders, his face calm, but his eyes burned with brilliance. Aspu. Nora Ma drew closer, his heart pounded as if all the years of darkness had only been leading him to this moment. Soft whispers rippled through the pews, not pity but awe. Here was a CEO once branded crippled, now waiting proudly for the love of his life. Nora stopped before him. Jonathan lifted his gaze, his storm-gray eyes locking onto her warm brown ones. The whole world seemed to dissolve, leaving only the two of them, as it had in the cafe the night he proposed, as it had behind the scenes of that wedding years ago. The priest's solemn voice rose beneath the vated ceiling. Jonathan Sinclair, do you take Nora Fields to love and to cherish in wealth and in want, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? Jonathan Shaw's voice was low but unshakable. I do, the priest turned. Nora Fields, do you take Jonathan Sinclair to love and to cherish? Till death do you part. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she smiled. I do. The cathedral erupted in applause, mingling with the soft swell of organ music. Then came the words, "You may kiss the bride." Nora leaned down ready to kiss him, as she had countless times before. But Jonathan placed his hands on the armrests and drew a deep breath, and to everyone's astonishment, he pushed himself upward. His legs trembled as his whole body battled against gravity. But inch by inch, he rose. Eli Davis appeared quickly, with a pair of crutches hidden behind the altar, but Jonathan only gripped one loosely. He wanted his legs to bear the weight, even if only for a few seconds. The room fell silent, breathless. Nora froze, her hands trembling against her lips. Tears streamed faster, blurring her vision. Jonathan turned, a radiant smile breaking across his face. I want you to have a memory you'll never forget. The moment your groom stood to kiss you. And then for the first time since the accident, his legs held firm as he bent down and pressed the most sacred kiss to Nora's lips. The cathedral exploded with applause and cheers. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Caleb Fisher jumped up and shouted, voice ringing to the rafters, "Daddy is standing! Daddy is a superhero!" Laughter and tears swirled together, creating the most beautiful music of love. The reception burst alive afterward, bathed in lights and fireworks. As the first dance began, Jonathan still held on to the crutches, but Nora's hand clasped his, and Caleb Fisher clung to his leg, pulling the three of them together onto the dance floor. Guests cheered as they watched. A family of three, hand in hand, swaying beneath golden lights. Jonathan stood, not perfectly, not forever, but enough to hold Nora and Caleb Fisher in the same embrace. Nora lifted her face, tears mingling with her smile. Jonathan leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Thank you for making me stand, not just with my legs, but with my heart." She squeezed his hand tight. "And I'll walk with you." Every step. Caleb Fisher looked up, innocent and fierce. "We're a team forever." The music swelled. Fireworks burst outside the cathedral windows, flooding the hall with radiant light. Amidst cheers and endless applause, the little family held each other close.